Oh, I think I've got an acute sense of the absurd. I mean, I think life hovers between tragedy and absurdity. And the tragedy, I mean, sometimes they cross over. You know, tragic things can be absurd. And I think that, you know, my view of life is that it's a kind of inexplicable journey. And a lot of it is complete lunacy. Human behaviour is, you know, mad. Our rules are often crazy. So, you know, I think you've got to have a healthy sense of the ridiculous. Otherwise, I don't think you're being honest about the way life plays itself out. The plan was that myself and a mate were going to travel around Australia, and we bought a caravan, which is a bit quaint. And then he pulled out, so I was sort of stuck. So I tried to make candles for a living at home. My candles wouldn't burn. I was determined that I wasn't going to go on the dole because I just felt that that was an admission of complete failure. So I tried to make candles, but I did some research and put too much stuff in that stops them from burning, and they didn't burn at all. I couldn't market them as safety candles because they were, you know, effectively not candles. They were just lumps of wax. So I realised that wouldn't work. So I then went to work for a company which was actually Hills Hoists, and I worked in their galvanising plant, which was an incredibly toxic environment where we put zinc on the uprights of Hills Hoists. It's called galvanite, and that polluted area of Edwardstown that everyone talks about. Well, that was me. And my job was at the end of these 30-tonne pots of molten zinc, which were at 475 degrees centigrade and had a film of concentrated ammonium chloride as a flux over the top. And these pipes had come through these pots, and they'd been through a pickle to get the rust off them, but they often still had water in them. And the water would, you know, under that temperature would superheat, and they'd fire lumps of zinc out like bazookas. And my job was to stand as they were dragged out of the pots and dumped into these massive vats of water, was to hit them with a piece of metal to make sure they all end up in the vat. And if they didn't, and they hooked up, they'd come crashing down and we'd all scatter. We had no hard hats, we had nothing. And the guys on the pots who dragged the thing just had their forearms were just a jigsaw of scars from the zinc coming onto their arms. It was Dickensian. My brother and I took a year off, and my brother and I worked in a timber yard for a year, or for 6 months, cutting up timber. My brother and I would, push this timber through this massive saw. And in the end, my brother had bad lungs, so he started coughing because there's this massive amounts of sawdust being generated. There was no kind of flu or anything, although we were outside. We'd end up almost knee-deep in sawdust. And so they said, oh, you've got to wear these masks. You know, there was these yellow plastic things like this out in the sun. And we just have footy shorts on and no top and these weird masks. And so we'd have these competitions to see how many pieces of wood we'd get through with our masks on. And of course they'd steam up inside so you couldn't see what you were doing. And you hear this whining of the saw, the thing would come through. And then we'd whip our masks off and our heads would just steam. I remember these guys coming around the corner on a forklift. And we're standing there, and there was just steam coming off our heads like this. I go, shit, look at those guys, they work hard. In terms of, then crossing across to a nightly television program, and, learning the skills to provide the ingredients for that, it was like seriously biting off, an indigestible quantity and, chewing like crazy. And there were times in the first thing I thought, well, no, look, I lack so much experience in this, and I don't have, the contacts which are so important in journalism. I don't even know how any of those processes work. I wouldn't know a press secretary if I fell over one, and I didn't know how to speak to these people. Do you speak to them reverentially? Do you yell at them? I mean, what is any of those skills? And I didn't have them. So there were times when I thought, this is too hard. What the future holds for this kind of television is anybody's guess. For me personally, I can see myself doing another 5 years or so. There might be a time when they get sick of me and tell me to bugger off, but I've still got a couple of kids who are teenagers that I've got to look after, so I'm a late starter, and I started late with my children as well as my career. The thing I've learned, and I learned it too late, is that nothing's impossible, and that you have to have a goal, and you have to pursue that goal. And I mean, I suppose the thing that slowed me down was finding out what it might be. Now, had I lived my life again, yeah, things would be very different. I mean, I don't think anyone who's been through 60 years of existence would say you'd do the same thing all over again. But I think I felt like I had to discover who I was, and having done that, I could concentrate on what that person felt they were supposed to do.